What's up there, guys? Thanks for tuning in. I'm Rick. This is Fanfare for the Conscious, and in the video today I'm going to be talking about self-defense, righteous indignation and the right to bear arms. Let's dive in. So I've decided to title today's video Defense Against the Dark Arts. And as I mentioned in the intro there, the main subjects I'm going to be covering are self-defense, righteous indignation and the right to bear arms. Now I'm also going to touch a little bit on at the end about the spiritual component to this, because I know there's an awful lot of people out there who are extreme pacifists, and I would actually describe myself to be one of them, believe it or not. However, I do also recognise the importance of being able to defend oneself against the darker forces of the world on a psychological and a spiritual and a physical plane. So what is self-defense? Well, self-defense is the sovereign right for all beings to defend themselves. And the way I put it on the board there says all beings have both the right and the duty to protect their life and well-being under natural law. We cannot rely on others to do it for us. And this includes the application of force, where that force is reasonable, proportionate, and justified. And these are the three things that we really need to bear in mind when we are considering using the application of force. Now that depends, again, entirely on the domain to which you are using that defense. Obviously, there are psychological forces and there are spiritual forces and there are also legal forces and there are also physical forces as well. And all these different forces do need to be taken into account when we are dealing with self-defense. Always considering whether the application of that force in the specific situation in which you are placed is reasonable and proportionate and justified. And you should feel confident whenever you are applying that force in the spirit of defense of your person or your property or your family or your land, that you can stand in front of a jury of your peers and justify why your actions were reasonable and proportionate. Again, this all comes down to self-sovereignty. To what degree was your sovereignty being infringed? And the degree to which your sovereignty was being infringed determines the degree to which you can apply force in response to that. So how do we know when we are acting in the spirit of self-defense? Well, we know that because our gut will tell us, our spirit will tell us, our emotions will tell us. And what is that emotion? Well, it is something called righteous indignation. Now, this is not to be confused with egoic anger. Egoic anger is when the psyche itself feels threatened, when there is fear of losing face, of looking silly. And that does not infringe upon your sovereignty in all but the most extreme cases of slander and libel. So it's not egoic anger. Righteous indignation is a passionate expression of resistance to the violation of sovereignty. When you get that feeling inside yourself, like I did when I was told that the venue in which I primarily worked was going to insist on pointing a temperature gun at the middle of my head. That is what I felt. It was not anger. It was a righteous indignation and an expression of the resistance to the violation of my sovereignty. The same feeling you get in the pit of your stomach when someone tries to make you wear a mask, when someone tries to insist that you submit yourself to track and trace, when someone tells you that they are going to force vaccines on your children. That is not egoic anger that you are feeling. That is a righteous indignation. And this is a force of light, a force of positivity. And you should not feel ashamed to possess that righteous indignation. You should harness it, and that should be the fire that drives you to act, that drives you to apply force as appropriate. So, coming into these ideas of reasonable and proportionate and justified, we do now need to discuss the right to bear arms, because what is reasonable, proportionate and justified will be different in different situations. So the right to bear arms is a necessary requirement in the aid of equalisation. If we want a 4.5 foot 6 stone woman to be able to apply force to defend herself against an 18 stone 7 foot man, then there needs to be some method of equalisation. She would have to be a fairly outstanding martial artist, a professional martial artist, to deal with that sort of opponent, presuming he is also equally well trained. And that is where this equalizer comes into play. The ownership of and instruction in the handling of arms should be considered in the same manner as any other martial art. Now I'm going to segue a little from what I've put on the board to give a little bit more of a personal understanding of this situation as a whole. I am a peaceful being in myself. I've had very few physical altercations in my life, and all those physical altercations were forced upon me. I was left with no other option but to act and apply force reasonably, proportionately, and because I was justified to do so in order to defend my being. Whether it was someone physically assaulting me for no reasonable reason, or whether it was someone trying to steal my property, I have had to, on numerous occasions, apply force in the defence of my person. And I've always been someone who has studied martial arts to, at the very least, a functional level whereby I can use it against an average street thug. Now that does not mean I'm a violent person. That does not mean that I seek to get involved in altercation. In fact, the first thing that you should be doing as a method of self-defense is trying to walk away from the situation. That is defense number one. If you cannot walk away from the situation, then your second defense is to try and diffuse that situation verbally. If you still cannot diffuse that situation verbally, then you are left with no other option but to defend yourself physically. As long as you can prove that you have gone through this process of self-defense, walking away, trying to diffuse, and then acting with force in order to defend yourself, then you have got righteous indignation and your response was reasonable, proportionate, and therefore justified. Owning a gun or learning martial arts should not mean that you are considered to be a violent person who seeks to cause destruction. All it should simply mean is that you have prepared yourself for the eventuality in which you have to use it. One of my American friends who I've not spoken to in a long time used to say to me that having a gun is like having a condom. You would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. I'm just going to finish this off with a short paragraph that I wrote while I was considering this at the end and trying to figure out what I was going to use that little bit of space on the bottom of my board with. And I've put this down to living in light, because I consider myself a light being with the right to self-defense and with the righteous indignation to apply force where necessary. And with the right to bear arms, we would be equal with our opponents. So living in light. Light does not only illuminate softly those beneath its gaze. Light can also burn, destroy, and obliterate those which seek to oppose or oppress it. Thank you very much for watching. If indeed you still are, if you did like this content, don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up and the notification bell set to all. Make sure you're always kept up to date with all of my videos, which are dropped on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays at 8 PM UK time. If you would like to be part of our sovereign lawful gatherings of people who are building our own system to replace the corrupt tyranny to which we are all subjected right now, head over to lawfulbank.com. Get yourself signed up, take some time to explore the site. There will be more details coming in the very near future. Take care of yourselves, guys. Don't forget to stay free, think free, and act free. And as always, I'll see you next time.